Hope stood frozen, staring after the car. Someone had thrown out a backpack. But why? She stepped closer and carefully picked it up by the strap. It was a school bag, almost new, bright blue with little cars on it. And heavy, too. What a nice one. I'll give it to Paul for school, Hope thought, struggling to hide a smile. Her 7-year-old son had been using a worn-out old backpack for the second year in a row, a hand-me-down from his cousin. As a widow, she simply couldn't afford a new one. But this felt like a gift from fate, something she never dared hope for while walking down the dirt road home after her second shift. The wind swirled trash through the air, pushing against her back, sneaking under the collar of her thin coat. Her feet ached in wet boots, but out of habit, she turned toward the dump. It was her small, unspoken rule, to check it on her way home. Sometimes she got lucky, once it was a microwave that still worked, once a coat that looked nearly new after a wash. People better off often left usable items right at the edge, unwilling to toss them into the pile, maybe guilt nudged them to give someone else a chance. This evening hadn't seemed promising. Just broken furniture, shattered toys. Hope hunched her shoulders against the wind and was about to pass by when she heard an engine roar in the distance. A sleek black car pulled up to the very edge of the dump, too fancy for a place like this. Laughter rang out, carefree and male. And then, from the open window, a colorful backpack flew through the air and landed with a splat in the muddy slush. Tires spun, flinging up trash, and the car sped away in a cloud of dust. Hope stood there, a cold shiver crawling down her spine, maybe from the wind, or maybe from something else she couldn't name. She looked around. No one. A pair of stray dogs were digging through a heap of trash in the distance, and somewhere a bulldozer clanged. She quickly wiped the mud off the backpack's pocket with her sleeve. What's inside? Curiosity fought with unease. She glanced back at the road. What if the car came back? Still, she slowly unzipped it. Inside, she found neatly folded clothes, covering something else. Hope pushed them aside, and nearly dropped the bag. Under the hoodie lay stacks of dollar bills, perfectly arranged and bound with bank bands. So many. More than she'd ever seen in her life. Her heart pounded. This can't be real, raced through her mind. Her vision dimmed for a second. She felt like the ground had shifted under her feet. Her fingers trembled as she touched the top bundle. Real money, she thought. Stacks and stacks of real money. Hope looked around again, wary. Could it be some kind of prank? But the area was still empty. She slung the backpack over her shoulder and hurried home. The weight of the fortune dragged on her shoulder, and her knees started to wobble. Never before had fate handed her something like this. Just a year ago, Hope had lost her husband. Andrew, her beloved, died suddenly, tragically and senselessly. Their alcoholic neighbor had started up an old tractor and lost control. The machine veered off and hit Andrew as he walked along the side of the road. At 28, Hope was left alone with a young son. At first, the villagers helped however they could, but no one had much to spare. The insurance payout had gone straight to paying off old debts, and her meager wages barely covered food. Soon there were new debts, for gas, electricity. Just days ago, their landlord threatened to throw them out unless she paid 3 months' rent in advance. And yesterday, the school principal had scolded Hope in front of other parents. Your son's notebooks don't even have covers. Aren't you ashamed? Burning with humiliation, the young widow said nothing. Arguing would have been pointless. And now, this unbelievable money dropped right into her hands. It was hard to believe in such luck. She could pay off all her debts, buy Paul warm clothes and a proper backpack, even save up, maybe even buy a home of their own. But where did that money come from? Who would toss it in a backpack like that? Nothing this good ever came without a price. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, easy money's worth nothing. That warning had never felt more vivid. Fear gripped her. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe it was dirty money. On her way home, she ran into her neighbor. As always, he asked. "Find anything good?" Nicholas called out as he loaded bags of trash. Hope shook her head quickly. "Just bits and pieces," she replied, not wanting anyone to know about what she'd found. "Not now. Not ever. The quieter, the better." At home, she locked the door with the bolt and dumped the backpack's contents onto the old couch. Under the dim bulb, dozens of stacks of cash shimmered in greenish hues of wealth. Paul came back from school and stood beside her, his mouth wide open. "Mom, is that money?" "Real money," he whispered. Hope's throat went dry, but she nodded. "Whose is it? Can we keep even a little?" The boy's eyes sparkled as he reached for one of the stacks. "Don't you dare!" Hope cried out, grabbing her son's hand. Realizing how startled he was, she gently stroked his head. "I'm sorry. It's just, it doesn't belong to us. It's dangerous to take something like this. What if it's gang money?" Paul stayed silent, staring in awe at the sea of cash on the couch. Hope was terrified. But even more frightening was the decision she had to make. Go to the police. They'd surely take everything, and she'd be left with nothing. What if they even suspected her? Keep it? But surely someone would come looking. That expensive SUV came to mind. What if they returned? Or what if someone had been following them, and that's why they dumped it? Her thoughts spun in circles. She paced their tiny kitchen, nervously fidgeting with the ends of her headscarf. Paul sat beside the money, watching the way the lamp's light danced on the neat stacks. "Mom, let's hide it," he finally said, serious and quiet. "What if no one comes for it? Then we could buy an apartment, and a bike." "Oh honey, it's not that simple," she whispered, sinking down beside him. "People would kill for this kind of money. If anyone finds out we have it, we'd have been better off never finding it." She ran her hand along his back, trying to figure out what to do. It was already dark. The wind howled outside, the chimney gave a low moan. From the next room came a loud rattle, the old window didn't shut properly, and gusts of wind rattled it in the frame. Hope flinched. Her nerves were stretched thin. She had to hide the money and go to the police first thing in the morning. She quietly asked Paul to help. Together, they stuffed the cash wherever they could, under the couch, behind dishes, even inside the toilet tank. Soon, there was no trace of the mysterious treasure left in the house. Before bed, Paul asked if they could keep just a little. Hope only shook her head. "We can't take what's not ours." Having decided to go to the police in the morning, she fell asleep without realizing it. That night, a strange sound woke her, like the gate creaking in the yard. Hope's eyes flew open. The small bedroom was dark, lit only by pale moonlight. Her heart thudded. Were they here? She turned her head. Paul was sleeping peacefully beside her, breathing softly under the blanket. She slid off the bed and tiptoed to the kitchen. A dim nightlight glowed near the back door. In its faint glow, she saw a shadow. Someone was outside, right at the porch. She clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Silence stretched for several long seconds. Then a faint rustling, a click, the door trembled. For a moment, she didn't understand what was happening. Then she saw the metal latch slowly start to turn. Someone had pushed a long object through the doorframe crack to unlatch it. Hope backed away, cold with fear. "Who's there?" she barked, her voice hoarse but firm. The handle froze. Silence. Her heart pounded wildly. There was nothing she could use to defend herself. Paul. She had to protect her son. She rushed back into the bedroom and gently shook him awake. "Quiet, baby. Crawl out the window and run to Aunt Gina's. Quickly." The boy, still half asleep, didn't understand. But Hope shoved his coat on over his pajamas and helped him through the small window that opened into the garden next door. Paul yelped in surprise but did as he was told and ran into the dark. Just as she pulled away from the window, a loud crash echoed outside. The front door had been kicked in with a single brutal blow. Hope gasped. Two strangers burst into the house. They grabbed her roughly, barking threats and demanding the money. "Where is it? Tell us now, or I'll kill you," one of them growled. Hope covered her head in terror. "Don't hurt my son. I'll give it all back," she croaked. One of the men slapped her across the face. Blood filled her mouth instantly. Her vision blurred, her cheek burned with pain. They weren't waiting. One flipped the couch, pulling out the hidden stacks. The other tore through the kitchen. Things flew everywhere, money scattered across the floor. Hope watched the destruction in despair, and then a siren wailed in the yard. The police had arrived. Someone must have called after hearing the commotion. The intruders didn't stand a chance, they were quickly taken down and handcuffed. Hope, bruised and shaking with fear, could only thank God that she and her son were alive. She couldn't hold back tears of relief. Lieutenant Peterson helped her to her feet, gently draping his uniform jacket over her shoulders. His jaw tightened with barely restrained anger as he looked at her injuries. "It's over now, sweetheart. They won't hurt you again," he said in a rough but kind voice. "Your Paul is a real hero. He ran straight to us and sounded the alarm. You're safe now." Hope just nodded, unable to believe the nightmare had truly ended. Morning finally came. Once the criminals were taken away and the paperwork was done, Hope sat on a stool by her gate, wrapped in her scarf. Pale sunlight was rising over the village. A paramedic gently applied a bandage to her cut brow. Paul sat nearby on the porch steps, holding a warm mug of tea. His lips still trembled from the terror of the night, but his face beamed with pride. He hadn't left his mother's side since. "Mom?" Paul asked quietly, his voice unsure. "What happens now? Are we going to be poor again?" His lip quivered. He remembered how, for a moment, he had believed in a fairy tale, and then it all crumbled to dust. Hope pulled her son into a hug. Her heart was overflowing with gratitude that God had protected what mattered most. "We'll live honestly, sweetheart. And being poor isn't something to be ashamed of," she said softly, kissing the top of his head. "Money comes and goes. What matters is that we're okay." Just then, Lieutenant Peterson approached. He had just finished a phone call and was smiling warmly at the mother and son. "Hope, I've got news," he said. "You two are heroes. Really, those bills were stolen, and we've been searching for them. They're important evidence. Thanks to you, we've uncovered an entire gang operation." Hope blushed deeply. "Oh no. I didn't do anything. I only caused trouble," she said shyly, adjusting the bandage slipping down her forehead. "On the contrary." Peterson raised a finger, as if placing a bold exclamation point in the air. "You played a key role. Someone else might have run off with that money, but you brought it home and planned to hand it over to us. Those guys dumped the bag at the dump on purpose, trying to be clever. They thought they could stash it, lay low, and come back for it once the coast was clear. But you took it before they could. They followed you and fell right into their own trap." Hope shook her head, remembering how it had all spiraled, from the strange find at the dump to that night of fear and pain. And now, the thieves were in handcuffs, the yard was full of people, and the local officer was standing beside her. "We've contacted the rightful owner of the money," Peterson added, scratching his head. "We explained everything. He insisted on letting you keep half. Said it was the right thing to do, he's worried about you. He knows he wouldn't have gotten that money back without you." Hope stood silent, as if words had suddenly lost their meaning. Half. That kind of money belonged to a different world. She clenched her hands, feeling them tremble. "Thank you," she whispered. "Just, thank you." And that was all she could say. Paul jumped with excitement. "Mom! Does that mean we're rich now?" he asked, peeking over her shoulder. Hope smiled through tears. For the first time in ages. Genuinely. Joyfully. "Yes, my love," she said, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "Now we're the richest people in the world, because we're alive, and everything's going to be okay." Behind her, the first rays of sunlight gilded the rooftops, lighting up a new day. Hope lifted her face to the brightening sky and quietly thanked fate. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but now life would be steady. A life without fear, without debt or humiliation. An honest life, with room for simple human happiness. Within a week, Hope had paid off all her debts. The school principal personally commended Paul for his bravery. Life had begun to turn around. A month later, a special ceremony was held at the district community center. Hope stood on stage with Paul beside her. The hall erupted in applause, nearly the entire village stood to honor them. Some wiped away tears. She was presented with a certificate of appreciation and a valuable gift, in recognition of her honesty and courage. Hope accepted it all with a humble smile, holding tightly to her son's hand. For her, the real reward wasn't the certificate or the gift. It was the peace, safety, and quiet happiness that had finally returned to their home. Life had never spoiled Hope. If anything, it had tested her time and again. Most people would have broken, but she hadn't. Not because she was a hero, but because she didn't know how to live any other way. She always believed that no matter how dirty the world seemed, there had to be a place inside for honesty and kindness. That evening had been one of the hardest in her life, emotionally and physically. Fear, pain, helplessness, all blurred together. But fate had repaid her. Unexpectedly. Powerfully. The money would certainly help, but more important was something else, the proof that truth still mattered. That even someone small, living with integrity, could change the course of